Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. There seems to be a mindset that in order to be successful, you have to step into the spotlight. There's this ladder to climb. You need to become the boss or chase whatever version of success that has been dangled in front of you. But what if there's another way? What if fame, money, and power aren't all that we should really be chasing? Today's conversation with Tim Schurrer is full of stories that will encourage you to reevaluate the definition of success and learn a new, freer way to go about achieving it. So what makes Tim the expert? Well, he does know what it takes to build a winning team after spending almost a decade of his career launching two brands, StoryBrand and Business Made Simple, as COO alongside New York Times bestselling author Donald Miller. Before that, Tim worked at Tom's and at Apple. Today, you will quickly realize that the success you're looking for is within your reach, wherever you are, whatever your role is. And if you are left wanting even more stories after this conversation about the secret society, then you will have to check out Tim's incredible new book, The Secret Society of Success. I feel so honored to have gotten a copy, and it arrived right before I went on a trip. It was exactly what I needed. It wasn't one of those heavy, loaded with statistics, you have to do this books. No. It was so on point with stories of highly recognizable names and brands that suddenly felt unexpectedly relatable. I mean, who would have thought that I'd find myself feeling so connected to stories that were all about LeBron James and Bob Goff? I mean, I didn't see that one coming. So enjoy the conversation with Tim as he gives a glimpse into the secret society of success through powerful stories of people like Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and others that you likely have never heard of. But why? Because instead of chasing the spotlight, they focused on loving their work and living their life. Tim, welcome to the One Spark Stories podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Now, before we dig too deep into the secret society of success that you have laid out for us in your new book, I want to dig a little deeper into who Tim is. So, I hope you're ready.
Okay, great. I'm ready.
First question, what was your favorite childhood toy?
Anything sports related. So I was always playing with some kind of ball. So whether me and my dad were playing basketball or baseball or tennis, I mean, any kind of ball was my thing always.
Oh, that's excellent. So were you very involved in athletics as a kid or growing up?
I did, yeah, basketball and baseball. And then when I got into my sophomore year of high school, I realized that the pitchers just throw that thing way too fast. And so I quit that and started playing golf. So it was a good move.
Oh my gosh, you are not joking about the speed of impact for some baseball and softball. I actually played softball growing up, and after taking a softball to the face, I realized really quickly that's not ideal.
Yeah.
So instead I played goalie because that makes sense. Instead I'll have people kick a ball really hard at me and dive at their feet. But I digress. With athletics being such a prominent part of your childhood and growing up, is it safe to assume that you really had some athletic figures that you admired, or who would you say you looked up to as that idea of success?
Yeah. You know, for me, it really was, sports was just such a big part of my life and even my upbringing. And so all my heroes at the time were sports figures. So Michael Jordan, I had jerseys from so many different people. Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, whatever basketball team or baseball team. These were the guys that I looked up to. And so as if I thought what success looked like at the time, really it was professional athletes. That's what I aspired to be even when I was super young as a kid.
Funny, because I think that the visibility of sports is part of what makes it so appealing to have these ideals of success and the winner, they flat out are called a winner. So it definitely is not uncommon to have athletic idols, so to speak, or heroes. I mean, come on, isn't that why everybody wanted the starter jacket or the big puffy jacket with their favorite sports team? Because they were winners. But obviously, we know that it takes a lot to get there. And so where would you say that shift started to come for you when you realized, these people are at that point of success because of some other work behind the scenes?
Yeah. So this story, I think, puts a bit of language to how I have arrived at that place, because it's definitely been a journey. I'm sure a lot of people listening are familiar with Apollo 11. You've got Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But what a lot of people don't know, there's actually a third astronaut on that mission, and his name was Michael Collins. So here you've got Michael Collins, the guy Ubers Neil and Buzz to the moon, drops them off so the guys can do the various tasks that they have to do on the moon surface, while he, back in the command module, orbits the moon something like 26 times until the guys are ready to be picked up and brought back to Earth. And what would make this a pretty miserable story, in my opinion, would be if he were to get back, sit down with the press, and, say something like, well, it sure would have been nice to actually walk on the moon, and, acted like a victim, tried to take the spotlight away from the mission as a whole. But what's beautiful is that's not at all what happened. He gets back, sits down with the press, and talks about how content he was to have had one of those 3 seats. So early on in my life, I really wanted to be a musician, I wanted to be an athlete, but then that evolved into me wanting to be a musician. So in college, I started writing songs, and I actually created a couple records, and they were up on iTunes, and I just thought, okay, this is the path for me. Success is your name in lights. But what's interesting to me is over the last several years, I've been learning a different way of looking at success and a career path and career trajectory. And I just feel like for so many of us, success looks like stepping into the spotlight, climbing the ladder, being the boss, right? It's fame, money, power. Like, this is what so many of us are told and taught that we should aspire towards. But it's almost, for me in my career, as I've transitioned from roles where this was me trying to step into the spotlight to me being more behind the scenes, working alongside over the last 10 years as the right hand to Donald Miller, I actually found the meaning and fulfillment in my life coming as I stepped further and further behind the scenes. And so I no longer view success as the spotlight or fame, money, power. I actually am starting to look at success a little bit differently. And in this time, I am now transitioned out of my role working alongside Dawn and StoryBrand. Before that, I worked at Apple, and before that, I spent a little time working at Tom's Shoes. And in this time, I've discovered this secret society of people I call the Secret Society of Success. And it's a group of people who have shown me a new way to define success, because I don't think it's the spotlight now. And so I've been on this exploration to figure out what success is if it's not all of those things.
Your example of that move from athletics to music, and yet here we are now talking about a book that's coming. I think it's so important to reiterate that success is not a linear path. Mm-hmm. I mean, you would not be sitting here having this conversation about the Secret Society if it weren't for embracing that spark, for embracing that call to do something else. And so as people hear your background, and Donald Miller and the StoryBrand is very, very popular within business, And so people might wonder what prompted Tim to make that move, to leave such notable positions and companies and now start to share the stories of how others define success and how ultimately we should.
Yeah. Well, I never wrote the book thinking that I'd transition out and launch into a new career. I actually was wanting to write down the things that were inspiring me, because this cultural narrative of getting into the spotlight, it just didn't feel right to me, because that just wasn't my path. That wasn't the journey that I had gone on. And the stories that I was really inspired by were not stories of people who had achieved a massive amount of, notoriety, and therefore that's the thing that people are paying attention to. And if there was a movie made about a life like that, it's like somebody at the end of this 2-hour movie, they're driving off with, bags of cash. Like, no one's crying at the end of that movie, just so inspired. Like, that's not it. That's not the stories that we're really inspired by. So I started, as I thought about this idea of, hey, what would it look like to write a book? I started to think about the stories of people who really were inspiring. And so what I kept coming across was, it didn't have much to do with people's place on the org chart necessarily, because so many of the stories I call out and talk about in this book are people who have been very influential and actually have massive amounts of notoriety in their roles. But what inspired me was not the place on the org chart, that position. It was more the posture in which they showed up. And I was at an event, and there was a guy named Andy Stanley speaking at this event. And he was talking about this idea of finding our purpose, which for so many of us, as we're trying to navigate our lives and careers, purpose and finding what can give us that sense of purpose, that sense of meaning and fulfillment, that's the beginning, the starting point on that path. So he says, we live in this culture, in this society, which is very me-focused. We're often just asking questions like, why am I here? And constantly being asked, even from this consumerism world that we live in, what's in it for me? But Andy says, if we're to find our purpose, these are the wrong questions to ask. The question that we need to ask is this: who am I here for? And what I love about that who am I here for question is, it requires us to show up and bring our best, to operate out of our strengths, our skill set, our passions, but it all of a sudden puts us into a headspace, a posture where we do those things in service of others. Like, it's no longer just about us, it's we're showing up to make somebody else's life better. And so I love that concept so much that I came back, and in my office, I created an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and up at the top, really big, I wrote, who am I here for? And below it, I put the pictures and the names of every person on my team and their families. Because on the days, I'm sure you have these days, your calendar is maxed out, you have so many tasks, then you have time to accomplish in a given day. You want to just beeline it to your desk, and you are just thinking about yourself and all that you need to get done. It's on those days that I just needed that little reminder that I just said, okay, Tim, who are we showing up for today? And so it's stories of people like this who actually define success by how they're able to give and support others. And if there's a common denominator for people in the secret society, right, the foundation is really this idea of serving others, helping others win. And so the more I started to hear about these stories, the more I was inspired by them and wanted to just assemble, what if success could look like this instead of this other thing that so many people are talking about? So that was really the starting point, and it's been my motivation and my inspiration ever since.
The question about purpose and what am I here for is one that I feel is ever evolving for everybody. And it's a lot of why I talk about the ABCs of purpose. What is your alignment? What are the behaviors? And how are you connecting, creating, and celebrating to make sure that you are still on track? And it's interesting, that notion of who am I here for, and how people define success, because one of my favorite parts of this book early on, you mention Brad Montague and Robbie Novak, who some people may know as Kid President. As a former educator, Kid President was very prevalent in the classwork I did. You became part of some curriculum work that was built with different districts I was with at that time. And what's interesting is how you call out the fact that people were reaching out to them and asking them about, the work that they did. But when the kids would reach out, it wasn't about, how can I model this level of success? It was more of, how can I become a YouTube star? How can I be famous? And that's such a misconstrued idea. And of course, kids are young and naive and they don't have bills and all that responsibility yet. So it is a fleeting question or idea in their mind. But it's so important that we do position ourselves to understand what it takes to get there. So how did you get connected to the stories shared in here, aside from that one, but digging deeper into all of the accounts of success and what drove people to that personal definition? Where did those stories come from?
So a lot of the stories that I talk about in the book are not people that I necessarily have personal relationships with. Some of the people that I've been inspired by from afar, from seeing videos that they posted on YouTube or interviews that I hear on a podcast, people that I read about in books. So if we choose to be lifelong learners, that is the starting point. I think for so many of us, we can learn by just opening our eyes, having our antenna up for these kinds of stories. And, one of my favorite stories, I worked at Apple, and this was at the time when Steve Jobs was CEO, which was a pretty remarkable experience. And so, as you can imagine, even though I've not worked at Apple for 15 years, I have been a fan and paid attention so much to what they do. And the guy who's now the CEO, Tim Cook, there was a moment that happened a handful of years ago that I just was really inspired by. And so it's at the release of the Apple Watch. And this is a pretty big moment for Apple because after Steve Jobs passed away, Tim Cook was the one who'd actually been groomed to take over. So at the release of the Apple Watch, he's being interviewed by David Muir on national television. And David asked him, is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? And, just take a second and think about how you would respond if you're Tim Cook in that moment being asked that question. Because you got to think, for the last couple of decades, you've been behind the scenes, very much under the radar, off the radar for so many people. They have no idea what you'd contributed. So you may want to use this as an opportunity to remind people of all you've contributed to Apple's success that maybe people had no idea about. And maybe you want to try to prove to people and let them know you have what it takes to take the company into this next era. These are all the things that you're probably thinking about, but what's beautiful is how Tim actually responded. Is this the moment for you, the moment of your career at Apple? Tim says, well, it's a moment for Apple. I don't really think about myself that much. And I learned so much from Tim about leadership in just those two sentences. Having never met him before, I'm able to, because I'm paying attention and looking for stories and examples of leaders who are going about it the right way. I've learned from people like Tim when I hear statements like that. He's teaching me that leadership, successful leadership, looks like actually shining a spotlight on other people. It's walking with humility in all that you do and realizing that it's so many people that made that possible. This isn't about him. This is not the Tim Cook show. And he could have taken that opportunity to demand the spotlight. He was literally being, handed an opportunity, and he just didn't take the bait. So those are the kinds of people that I'm always looking out for, and then I'm trying to shape and model my life after, because of just how perfect of example it is for living in the way of the secret society.
That is such an incredibly powerful reminder that the work we do is bigger than us. And it's something that I think we all know, we all strive for, but there are some days that inner wiring of self-preservation seems to come out. So what a cool example. And again, knowing your book is just full of stories like this. Do you find that in that creative process, you were able to create a book that captured this secret society? Were there moments that it became a challenge in the editing? Because let's be honest, sometimes writing can be a very personal experience for people. It can be somewhat cathartic or therapeutic to get those ideas and words out. And whenever we create something new and get that feedback, it is important to reflect and say that's feedback, not somebody dismissing your ideas or discrediting it. But what was that experience like for you, watching your stories come to life in this publication?
Yeah. So I was really content with the book that I submitted. But as is true in any great project, when you have other really brilliant people working alongside you, contributing to it, they just can keep making it better. And so, although I really liked the ways that some of these stories were laid out and structured, the team of people in the editing process just made it even more clear. And we just continued to eliminate any clutter that may be confusing or distracting from the main point. And so I am just grateful for so many of the people that I was able to work with. Brigida and Sujin are two of the main people at the publisher that I spent a lot of time with, and just a whole batch of copy editors and people who make sure that there's no typos. And so I really feel like that group of people that will never get the credit for the work that they did. My name's on the cover, but what should be there instead is probably 25 people that were helping me along the way, from even people who helped me even write the book in the first place. And so I really love the posture and what I learned from even people like that who, here they are doing all this work that will never be recognized, that will never be noticed. But that's not what motivates them. It's not, that recognition is not the driving force in all that they do. And there's this plaque that sat on Ronald Reagan's desk when he was president. And, it says this: there is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. And so many people that I've worked with and locked arms with in the creation of this book have lived by that. They are the secret society.
Oh
right?
My gosh, I love that. I mean, seriously, that's so spot on.
And it's actually that same not needing the credit thing is exactly the way that Tim Cook was leading. He didn't need the credit for the work that he had done. And so what does it look like to live in the way of the secret society, to join the secret society of success? Not needing the credit is one of those things that you can do. That's one of the ways that you show up. Because I call out this thing in the book, I call out what the spotlight mindset, this unhealthy desire for attention and recognition. So it's the thing that all of us are up against, because the spotlight mindset in that Tim Cook example, the spotlight mindset would make you want to take the credit, to use that opportunity to leverage it for your own, promotion or whatnot. But the way the secret society actually has us responding very differently. And it's more hey, how can I recognize somebody else? How can I give away credit? How can I serve others and, be thinking, who am I here for? The latter is living in the way of the secret society.
Tim, you just hit on something that I think is so important for people to remember, and that spotlight mindset. I truly believe that is part of what cripples so many people from moving forward with their dreams, because in their mind, they aren't that, they don't have the followers, they don't get the likes, they don't have this big presence, therefore they are not enough. And it is such a misnomer because of the amount of people that are driving the success behind the scenes. I mean, my goodness, what people forget is that all this consistency that you see from Insta famous or online personalities or big businesses is that it takes a village. There are people behind the scenes helping map that out. And so one of my very favorite quotes came several years ago when I first heard it, and I believe it was Tony Robbins who said people are celebrated in public for what they work for years behind the scenes. And that is so true. That spotlight mindset that you have to be the front and center, that people need to see you all the time, and you are the definition of success. Well, what are you doing behind the scenes? What daily intentional actions are you taking to set up that purpose? We're going to go back to the purpose. What is it that you're doing to drive to that purpose that you hold, not what you think other people will want from you? Because that chasing what you think they want is where that feeling of imposter comes, because it's not authentic to you. What have you done, or what do you suggest other people unlearn in that mindset to really help themselves move forward in their authentic success, or being comfortable being part of that secret society, and reduce the spotlight mindset and really just get back to enjoying their work and enjoying what they bring to life each day?
If I'm doing my job in all of this, when I have the opportunity like this to talk with someone like you on a podcast, I feel like when I'm at my best and in my healthiest headspace, I'm getting out of the way as fast as possible. Because I think that the message that people really need to hear is we need to learn to redefine success. Because if we don't, we may not realize how much that simple definition of success, even if we're operating out of it subconsciously, how much that's affecting our mindset and our behaviors. And so I really do want to just help plant the seed that, hey, what if success isn't fame and money and power? Like, what if actually it can look a little bit more like living in the way of the secret society? And a North Star for me as I've been working on this book, and it's really what I hope will be a North Star for years and years to come. It's this quote, Albert Schweitzer. He says, "I don't know what your destiny will be. Some of you will perhaps occupy remarkable positions. Perhaps some of you will become famous by your pens or as artists. But I know one thing. The only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." And I just hope that, anyone listening, myself included, that we'll be the kinds of people who will show up and, have our antenna up for somebody who maybe needs our help, that we can be more about the assist, helping others win, than obsessing over our own success. And I don't know what the end result in all that will be, but to me, that feels like the place that we need to start, the direction that we need to head, because I feel like if we do that, the rest is going to take care of itself.
If there is one thing that I think people need to take away, it's that the idea of being able to be a part of the assist. That's even golf. You mentioned playing golf, and even though it seems like a solo sport, it's not. Even great golfers have a caddy. That takes a team. It takes a village, and so just remembering that the end is not defined. I mean, shoot, if a couple years ago we had talked, I may very well be talking about your number one hit, because we would have thought that was the end goal. But it can change, and it adjusts as we do and as we learn more and grow. So, Tim, I am so excited for people to get the book in their hands, but they can also listen to you by tuning into your podcast. Is it Building a Winning Team?
Build a winning team. Yeah.
God dang, I knew I was so close. But I'm curious about what led you to the podcast, and really how it correlates to the book, what people can expect from each of those individually and combined.
Yeah. So, as I've thought about what are the kinds of books, what's the kind of content that I really want to put out into the world, really it's under that umbrella of I want to help people build winning teams. And so I launched a podcast with that name, and the first guest was David Novak, who's the former CEO of Yum Brands, which is the parent corporation for KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut. And he helped create a culture of recognition at Yum. And at the time, he had 1.5 million employees. But they really wanted to recognize and value every person's contribution. And so I've learned from people like David, success actually looks like recognizing people for their work and leveraging that mindset living in the way of the secret society and how that can impact an entire corporation. Scott Hamilton is episode 2, the Olympic gold medalist. He talks about how, what if success looks like embracing challenges and learning from failure? And so people like that are people who I've been really inspired by, and these are the kinds of conversations that I'm putting out there on that podcast. But really for me, to build a winning team, living in the way of the secret society has got to be the foundation for all of us, because we can actually look at everything through that lens of helping somebody else win, being more others focused, other directed. I think that's the place that we all can start from and operate from if we want to actually build more healthy teams and cultures.
So the synergy is there because in order to build a winning team, you have to first uncover and understand the value of that secret society of success, right?
That's right.
Well, Tim, I certainly thank you for taking the time to share all of this insight with us. I know people are going to be so excited to connect with you, so I'm going to make sure to link all of that in the show notes. And the book comes out in the middle of May, so if you haven't pre-ordered your copy, do so now. And if you're listening, once this episode has already aired, hop on and order it. It is a true gem.
Yeah, and if you go to secretsocietyfree.com, you can actually get the first 2 chapters of the book for free. So secretsocietyfree.com is a good place to go.
Hello, who doesn't love free, let alone when it's something as inspiring and impactful as a book like this. So thank you again, Tim. I truly appreciate your insights, this collection of stories, and really uncovering what it means to chase purpose, to understand your work and life, and think bigger than just the notion of success. You are absolutely fantastic, and I cannot wait for more people to uncover the secret society of success.
Thanks, Katie. This is awesome.
The stories Tim shares do such a fantastic job of shifting that daunting idea of success to something very attainable. As a parent, podcaster, and an author, I empathize so much with a lot of what Tim shared today in his journey and in the stories of others, that it sometimes can feel like success is bigger than us, but it's not when you approach it differently than what we've come to expect. So how do you learn this approach? Well, as Tim shares, with the Secret Society as your guide, with this community of people who know how to make an impact, whether they have the spotlight or not. That secret society will teach you to define success for yourself, to contribute to your team without minding who gets the credit, to make an impact that spans far beyond yourself, regardless of the size of your platform, to navigate living in the tension between contentment and striving, to go from feeling anxious, overwhelmed, and relentless in your job to being confident in the value that you bring to the team, and to discover meaning and fulfillment in the work that you do. So what in the world are you waiting for aside from me to stop talking? So place the order now for the Secret Society of Success. I've made sure to include a link to Tim's website and all the ways that you can connect with him in the show notes. And then start becoming more aligned with your purpose. Connect deeper with your secret society and redefine success for yourself. Be well, stay curious, and I'll see you real soon.
Hey, did you know that Halley's Comet will next appear in 2061?
Later, Tater.